Welcome to the 2021 Watershed Congress. Today is Tuesday, day 2 of our virtual Watershed Congress week. We're happy that you're joining us today. The Watershed Congress is organized by the Delaware Riverkeeper Network in collaboration with many other organizations. My name is Emma Brady, and I'm the Administrative Coordinator at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and I'm also your moderator for this session, Land Use Decisions, What Every Resident Should Know. We are pleased to present our speakers for this session, Fred Stein, a community organizer for the Delaware Riverkeeper Network since 1994, who has worked on a variety of issues including floodplain protection, stormwater management, land preservation, community resiliency, and habitat restoration, and Lorraine Prince, a member of the Sustainable Collingswood Green Team, a lead watchdog for the Newton Creek Watershed Association, the Education Director at Sadler's Woods Conservation Association, and the Stormwater Management Lead for the Tri-County Sustainability Alliance. I'm going to turn it over to Fred to begin.
Thank you, Emma. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Lorraine and I put together about an hour-long presentation that we hope will be valuable to everyone, but particularly to people, environmentalists and community activists that may just be getting started and might want to learn more about the nuts and bolts of advocacy. I started with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network many years ago as a volunteer and just found that reaching out to the community, there's so many passionate people in every section of the watershed, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania. And it's just an exciting, an exciting position because you meet so many people that are passionate. And we hope Lorraine's and my presentation will give you some strategies and ideas and techniques that maybe you can get even more, accomplish even more to protect the creeks and streams that flow through your community. So on that, I'm going to open up the PowerPoint. I'll start out with a couple of slides, half a dozen slides, then Lorraine goes, and then I'll finish it off. Oh. There you go. So, the title of the project of this presentation is Land Use Decisions, What Every Resident Should Know. And we got the slides and the meat of this information, both Lorraine and I, by going out and working in communities and trying to get development to scale down, trying to get dredging projects to be more environmentally sensitive. And so we learned a lot by trial and error. And so the presentation that we'll cover today, it's going to, it may focus on a specific project in North Jersey or in Radnor Township over in Pennsylvania. But the ideas and the concepts are ideas that we think will work in the Catskill Mountains or down in the Delaware Bay shores and all over the place. Yep. To figure out which button advances there we go. So in 2010, the Delaware Riverkeeper Network took a close look in Hamilton Township, Mercer County, New Jersey. We looked at how their planning and zoning boards approved projects and whether they complied with New Jersey's stormwater rules. And we looked at about 43 different projects, but we found 12 that we took as the dirty dozen and the poster child of just how a developer can come in and share information that's not always accurate. It may be just misleading. It could be downright false. And the checks and balances of a local planning board or a local zoning board just failed to pick up on these, and they just let those projects sail through to the detriment of the watershed and to the residents that live in the community and downstream. So that was in 2010. We put this out there. We produced this report. DEP agreed with our findings. New Jersey DEP agreed with our findings that these projects were, and it started a whole conversation statewide on, are these same things happening in my town? And so we got a lot of value out of it. More recently, in 2020, we took another look back, a 10-year look back, and we looked at another maybe 18 or 20 different projects. And we found that little really, unfortunately, had changed, even though New Jersey had revised their stormwater rules twice in that period of time and made them a little bit stronger each time. We still found problems, and we still found flooding was prevalent. And this is in Hamilton Township, right along the Assunpink Creek near Trenton. It probably could look like most of the towns that most of the viewers today are familiar with. So again, what we're hoping to do is to provide some resources, some ideas, and some strategies for you. And we hope in the stories that we're about ready to tell you, you'll walk away feeling like, well, that might work in this issue, or maybe something will come up next week that you might find something similar. So the first series of slides are projects deceptions that projects were presented by a developer's engineer to a planning board or a zoning board, and they just didn't tell the whole story. Whether it was honest mistake, I doubt that, but or why wasn't this information either initially presented, or why was it where the township, who has a consulting engineer, every township has a consulting engineer. Hamilton Township's a larger one. Many larger townships have their own engineering department. Nobody caught this. So this, you can see in the yellow circle here that this swale that goes across the property was not identified on the original plans. And it wasn't until the 11th hour, when the planning board was getting ready to approve it, that we brought this up, saying this doesn't have all the features, and this, how the stormwater runs off the property before the development is built, before the new development is built. It's very important. How that stormwater flows off has to be calculated into the new development. And in this particular case, that swale and the houses in the background that you see have a long history of flooding. And the creek that's right in front of those houses is the Pond Run. And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was cement. It was lined with concrete because it flooded so frequently. So flooding is not a novelty item here. It's not an anomaly. So this, when you're looking at a project, go out and take a look at the site. Take a look at Google Maps and other local mapping. Fly a drone over it if you have to, but take a look at and make sure that the features on the property are what's actually being presented to the planning and zoning board, who you would think would want to do the same thing, but that's not always the case. The other project, the other similar type of project is, again, the conditions of a property before development have to be calculated, because how an area of land, a piece of land, manages and holds stormwater, goes into the calculations of how stormwater has to be managed once it's developed. This site up in North Jersey, they wanted to put a gas station on this. And they came in, the bigger picture with the for sale sign on it, they came in and said, well, that's open space. No, it's meadow. They called it, they called it open space. And so open space in New Jersey anyway has a definition that it's turf grass. It's like a golf course type of thing. So of course, a golf course doesn't hold as much stormwater as this meadow, this natural meadow that you look out here. So that was spotted, and that wasn't found out until 6 or 8 months down the way. And somebody said, oh, that's not turf grass. That's, there's shrubs there, there's tall grasses, there's mustard, there's echinacea, there's all kinds of grasses. And that retains much more stormwater. So that now what it did, it forced the applicant to go back and redesign their stormwater feature. So it's knowing what's on the land prior to is an important thing. The same is true with the smaller image to the left. This is an aerial view, and you can see there's a lot of shrub on here, and a lot of woodlands too. And the developer said that it was I think it was like 84% grasslands. And of course, that allowed them to come in and build a less robust stormwater collection system, because it's all calculated, engineers calculate it numerically. And they said, oh, it's just all grasslands. It only holds X amount of stormwater, not how much stormwater woodlands and shrub would hold. So they ended up getting away with a very wimpy stormwater collection system in that particular case. So knowing these things, when you're reading the applications, know that, you know, these little things can make a difference. We call this another common deception is failure to connect the dots. This is something you don't have to be real even close. You know, you can be very just familiar with where are the common flood zones or the flooding, the common problem flooding areas in your community. And many times, you know, just downstream of where they want to put in a big redevelopment project or cut down woodlands. In this case, it was cut down woodlands to put in solar. They wanted to cut down a wooded wetlands and an area where the white polygon there is on the right-hand side. They want to put in solar arrays. And no one was talking about the downstream flooding. The picture to the left is the streets that you see highlighted in red. And so you can see this is not made by this map is not made by some master map maker. It was just a Google Earth with a couple of lines here and there with a couple of stars where we knew people had flooded properties. And we took this into the planning, was either planning or zoning board. This particular project went to both. And I can't remember which it was that we went first, but my point is that this kind of information, reminding the planning board members that there's already an existing flooding problem there, and pictures are a great way to do that. You know, an applicant isn't necessarily going to come in and say, I know you're getting flooded downstream, but we want to cut down 12 acres of your woods anyway. But it can be the residents that make that appeal. Here is, again, in the devil is in the details. This is another common deception. Could be to mislead or to misstate factual information. In this particular project, in the image and the text on the right-hand side, and I'm not expecting you to read that, but that text says that the soils don't infiltrate water, so it's considered a hydraulic group D, which means it's soils, dense soils like clay that doesn't drain. But an image that we got from, in this case, is another New Jersey project. We got a New Jersey, these images, these maps are just as available in Pennsylvania too, shows that it's a wellhead protected area, and it's prime groundwater recharge. So the information that they were presented, that the planning board was presented, saying it does, you know, the soils don't drain well, so we don't have to recreate that in our development project. The maps from the state show otherwise. And you come about this by reading these documents, getting some friends together, neighbors, other concerned citizens, and dividing these projects up and reading them and having conversations about it. But there's resources out there like the state aquifer recharge maps in New Jersey, and they have them in Pennsylvania too, that can compare the information that the applicant is selling, that you can raise and bring these questions back to the planning board or zoning board. I think this is my last slide before Lorraine jumps in. Another very common is they generalize and talk about wetlands like wetlands are all the same, and they aren't. We found this in the one of the larger pipelines coming across Pennsylvania, bringing Marcellus shale gas through New Jersey. Is in the applications they were just talking about, we're going to be destroying X number of acres of wetlands, but don't worry, we're going to recreate them nearby. But what they didn't say is they were cutting forested wetlands, which has an entirely different ecosystem and soils and that sort of thing. They were cutting those down and they were building more shrub wetlands, which are valuable too, but it's not a one-to-one biological balance. And so those sorts of things, again, are, if they can be spotted, these are the questions that have to be asked, because they aren't all created equal. Lorraine, I'd like to introduce Lorraine Prince.
I am now unmuted. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Lorraine Prince, as Fred said. You could read what I'm going to talk about. That's the title. But I just wanted to let you know that I am one of the people, when I met Fred, he's a citizen action coordinator. Did I get that right, Fred?
Yeah.
And I'm one of the citizens that was influenced by him. I'm not, I do everything as, I'm a volunteer, basically. My background is not in environmental science. I am just basically somebody who's always been interested in my very, very local environment. It's like super hyper local. So that basically means I'm working in one watershed, which is why I'm part of the Newton Creek Watershed Association. I call myself the main watchdog. This is a watershed in Camden County near Philadelphia, but it's in New Jersey. And what I did, I took a suggestion from Fred when I was talking to him one day, and he said, you know, I wonder how much stormwater runs off because zoning boards grant variances. And a variance means it's when a homeowner goes to a zoning board and asks for some dispensation to let them cover up more of their property, meaning more impervious cover than ordinarily would be allowed by zoning laws. So he wondered about that, and I did too. And I said, oh, okay, let me go take a look at that. And so what I did is I've done a case study, and I'm going to show you what I did, and I'm going to tell you where I got this stuff in case any of you are interested. I will say that this is the kind of thing that has had more effect than anything I've done so far with my environmental work that I've been doing for about 6 years now as a pretty dedicated volunteer. Than anything else I've done. It mostly has to do with trying to influence municipal entities, meaning towns and things that are towns and municipalities in my area. Go ahead, Fred, advance, please. Okay, so one of the bits of text on the title slide said, "Who's really in charge? Who's really making decisions?" So just so that we all know, on the super hyper local, scene, there's really three options that we residents have for protecting our neighborhoods and our waterways. I'll start with the municipal stormwater ordinance. Most every town has something that says about how they're going to handle their stormwater. Everybody knows about zoning boards and planning boards. In some places, they're the same board. And then there's stormwater utilities, which is a concept that's been around a while, but not so much on the East Coast. It basically has to do with a fee-based approach to maintaining and improving stormwater systems. It's fee-based, which means that it by law, at least in New Jersey, you have to use the fees that you collect only on stormwater mitigations. So it's dedicated money. So it's not like, for instance, if your town collected fees and said, well, you know, you're covering up so much and we have our own special mitigation fee. And then they take, say, $10 every time somebody covers up 10 square feet. But the thing is, a town could use that money if they wanted to. But a stormwater utility can be something that a town incorporates or a county incorporates, and the money that is in there is dedicated purely to stormwater mitigation. Fred, next slide, please. Okay, so what I did was, since Fred said to me, gee, I wonder how much, you know, the zoning boards around here, around the Newton Lake watershed, are actually allowing for more impervious cover. So what I did is, and I happened to be lucky, my town that I live in is Collingswood, New Jersey. It's in Camden County, right near Newton Lake. And so there's 4 types of zoning that I wanted to investigate. There's actually more zoning types in my area, but these were the 4 that I wanted to check out. Single family detached homes that sat on 6,000 square foot lots. Single family attached homes that sit on 2,000 square foot lots. And then single family detached homes, these are the bigger lots, 8,500 square feet, and then the professional office district. Most of the properties in this town, now Collingswood is a very built out town. We don't have big industry. We're not like some towns with a lot of open space. We are a suburb of pretty much Philadelphia, even though it's across the river. We have parks, we have that sort of thing, but for the most part, our open spaces are in people's yards. And we do have flooding. We have basements that fill up. So anyway, most of the properties in Collingswood sit on 6,000 square foot lots. That's the first circle that you see there. And that's where most of the properties are. And I imagine when I saw the data, that's where I get most of my data. So Fred, next slide. Okay, now this looks complicated, but I'll show you around it. It's basically, this is the case study. I went and I discovered where my town actually stored online, fortunately for me, all their records having to do with the variances that the zoning board happened to grant between August 2016 and December 2018. I discovered that there were 12 requests for variances that were submitted and approved. And these were variances that had to do with impervious cover. And then that's what all these bars in here. There's actually 12 bars top to bottom. The first bar in each section has to do with what the truly allowable percentages are. For instance, this first batch right here, this is single family detached home, 6,000 square feet. You're allowed to have 40% impervious cover and 60% pervious. So that means that there's more absorption going on these 6,000 square foot properties than runoff in terms of the properties. And so there were what, 7, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 or 8 of these properties. And these are just the dates that I pulled the data from. I didn't want to put their addresses in them and embarrass anybody. But this is the red, the dark red shows the impervious cover as zoned. The slightly dark pink shows the increase in an impervious cover that was granted to them earlier than my case study timeframe. And then the pink shows what the latest variance allowed them to do. And so this is like a balance between impervious and pervious. So the more you increase the impervious, the less pervious. I'm sorry, the more you increase the pervious, the less impervious you're going to have, meaning you're going to have more stormwater runoff. And so the odd thing is, which was surprising to me, was that 7 out of 12 requests already exceeded the zoned percentages. So if you look, these ones with the darker pink, they had already gone before the board and asked for, they'd asked for variances so that they could do whatever they wanted to do with their properties. And then later on, they came back and several of them had even more. So 7 out of those 12 requests that happened during this time frame for requests for properties that already exceeded the zoned percentage. And out of all of these, all 12 of these, only 1 variance was granted with mitigating conditions. And that's where the zoning board said to somebody who was putting in a pool that they should put in some trees. And that was the mitigating condition. Now, there's no law that said that they have to put in the trees. It was just a suggestion by the zoning board. And that's the thing that I learned, is that most of the things that the zoning board says to people is a suggestion. They don't have to do it. Once that variance is granted, the people can pretty much do what they want. So in other words, there's no law saying that you have to do any kind of mitigations, even if the zoning board says you should. And so basically, the average increase for these 12 properties that were granted a variance was 11% over the initial allowance. So for the 6,000 square foot properties, they should have had only 40% impervious. For the smaller homes, they're allowed to have slightly more impervious, but look at some of these. And look at this particular one right here for July 2018. This is a smaller property. They paved their entire backyard, and this is what was left. And there were no mitigating conditions whatsoever. So anyway, Fred, next slide, please.
And these next couple of slides is really where the magic happens for Lorraine's presentation to get people
Yeah.
to get their imagination kicked in.
So what I did is I didn't do this presentation for me or for the green team that I'm on. I did this to show to our zoning board. I had a hunch that being volunteers, part-time people working on a zoning or planning board, they're not spending a lot of time. You already saw that in some of the slides Fred showed you. The zoning, the land use people didn't go out and take a look at the properties that they were making rulings on, or making whatever it's called that they do, their approvals. So I had a hunch that my zoning board did not even understand what they themselves were doing, because they never go back and look back at anything. And again, are they going to connect the dots to know whether or not what their decisions are related to the flooding that we're having? So anyway, I saw an opportunity, and I started showing this around to not just my town, but to other towns. And my town didn't want to see it at first because they're too busy, and they didn't want to, they're just too busy. They just said, send it in, we'll read it. But that wasn't good enough. I wanted to present it. So it was helpful to me, and this is just a cool note to know. I showed it around to a whole bunch of other towns in the area who were more open to this. And so I was able to come back to my town and say, I've already shown it to Oak Glen and Moorestown and Haddon Township. I said, this slide presentation is about your data. You really need to see this from me. And so they finally relented, and I was able to show this presentation to the zoning board. And I didn't do it to embarrass them. I did it for awareness sake. And I have to say, it was done by Zoom. I wasn't there in person, but there was a reporter there. I got off the line after a short time, after I gave my presentation, and the reporter was still there, and she told me later that the zoning board people, she said to me, their jaws were on the floor, because this is the story. Okay, so here's the story. So I took 6,000 square foot property as as my focus, because most of the properties in this town are 6,000 square feet. And I wanted to know that every time, I had a hunch that the zoning board was thinking, we give a variance here and there, we let somebody put a patio in, a driveway, an extension on the house. It's like 1 or 2 or 3 percentage points past the zoning requirements. And I had a feeling that that's what they were thinking. So I came back and I started to do some math. I am not a math person. I am not an environmental professional. I'm a graphic artist. So that's why these slides look cool, but I really needed help with the math. So if for a 1 percentage point increase beyond the impervious cover for a 6,000 square foot property, that's only a 60 square foot area. All right, so if you allow for 60 square feet to be covered up on a piece of property that's 6,000 square feet, that's a 1 percentage point increase. That's the approximate size of like a quarter of a driveway. Okay, that's about as big as it is. Now here in New Jersey, it's the next one. Every 1 inch of rainfall produces runoff equaling 36 gallons. That's no matter where you are in the world, that's what it is. And so that's the equivalent to 2/3 of a steel drum. And this, if you cover up 60 square feet, you will get 36 gallons worth of extra water running into the environment. And so here's a picture for you. And the average yearly rainfall in Camden County is 45 inches a year. So the rainwater runoff in 1 year increased by that number, 1,620 gallons, which is approximately 6 kiddie pools. Fred, you can advance. So since those 6,000 square foot properties, on average, the zoning board allowed increases of 8 percentage points. Now remember, before I told you 11 percentage points, but this is only a subset. This is for the 6,000 square foot properties. On average, the zoning board during that 2-year period allowed these properties to increase their impervious cover by 8 percentage points. Okay, Fred, you can go to the next one.
And the point of this, right, was to make sure that they realized that even though they were thinking, oh, it's probably so insignificant, it was significant.
That's 8%, right? So now they're actually 48% impervious to 52% impervious to 48% pervious. So then I, of course, redid the calculation, so they knew on average what they were allowing to happen. So the results of an 8 percentage point increase of impervious cover for each 6,000 square foot property. That is 400, so again, that means that if you cover up 480 square feet of your property, if it's 6,000 square foot property, if you cover up 480 square feet, that's an increase of 8 percentage points more of impervious cover than you had before. And so every time it rains now on that 480 square feet, you're getting 288 gallons of stormwater running off the property. And that's the equivalent to 5 steel drums. And then you do the Camden County 45 inches per year, do the math, and it's 12,960 gallons of water. And that's the approximate equivalent of 1 swimming pool. Fred, next one. And so then what did all that actually add up to? During that 2 years, for those 7 properties that they allowed to increase an 8% of impervious cover, that's the equivalent of that number there, 90,720 gallons every year. And that in my town, that's our town pool. That's the equivalent to nearly a third of the municipal swimming pool water running off into the streets every year. Now, the thing is, this is only 7 properties. My town has been probably under these zoning laws since like the 1940s. So if they've been consistent over the years in terms of their allowing for the for impervious cover to cover up our rain absorbing backyards and all, you can imagine that what that has added up to over the years. Next one, Fred, please. And by the way, when I presented this, and my mayor of the town, who likes to play the skeptic, and also to check on me to see whether or not I was terribly afraid they were going to get into my math, but nobody did. So I guess that's if they're not going to go out and check, if they're not going to go out and even check the properties that they're supposed to be looking at from developers, I knew they weren't going to check my math, but my math is good. So he stood up and he asked me, he goes, why, he goes, because that was that 2-year period. He goes, how can you make that as a generalization? So I went back and I calculated for the past 2 years, and it's exactly the same. On average, they let between 8 and 10% of each property be covered up further than it was originally zoned for. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is a map. Fred talked about different maps, but this is one that I've used, and it's great because it's one of those maps. It's a GIS map. You can see where it's from on the bottom. It's a New Jersey map. It comes out of Rowan University, and you can make different layers, show or not show. So I went in and I asked to see my town with impervious cover, and this is how it's color coded. And so just to show you, like I live in this area right over here. I shouldn't say, you can't see my cursor. It's where it says 48% right in the middle, 48.1%. No, down lower. Down lower, Fred, to the left.
Down here.
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's Haddon Township, but next, it doesn't matter because most of the towns around here are the same. I mean, my area is zoned for 40% impervious cover, and according to this map, according to the data that made this map, my area where I live is 48.1%. We're already 8% over right there. That's the average in that area. The really dark purple is our business district. The lighter purple is our high school. The white is a park, that sort of thing. So these are really good tools to use. I've done this to other towns. When I've made this presentation, I've pulled up their towns and inserted that in place of this, just to make the point that, what's the point of zoning if you're going to blow past it every time somebody wants to put a patio or put an addition on their house? This is not anti-variance. So Fred, can I have the next one, please? This is not anti-variance. This has to do with just doing things the smart way. And that's what I'm trying to get my town to do. The zoning board may have been super surprised by this, and I'm waiting for them to have some kind of change. But I really don't think that they will, because like I say, that they're not that motivated to do so. So for a zoning board to allow for the increase of impervious surface without requiring mitigating conditions is just, I think, unconscionable. Most zoning boards don't require mitigations because they know they don't have any authority. So my premise is that stormwater management is too important to be left to zoning boards. And I think they've proved it to me, and the same with the towns around me. So to me, municipal, well, I should say, what I'm promoting, what I'm trying to get my township to understand is that municipal governments need to address impervious cover and codify it into law. Fred, can I have the next slide? And that'll be my last one. So be aware of increases in your local impervious cover. If you see like a Wawa turning into a super Wawa, if you see, you know, a house being knocked down and a bigger house being put up on top of it, your zoning board should be requiring mitigating conditions, but they probably won't, because I think they don't know how to do it. They're afraid to do it, and they don't know how to do it, and there's no legal way to make it stick. So what I've been advocating for is to support the addition of, this is number 2, to support the addition of minor development clause in our town's stormwater management ordinances. What that means is the state pretty much tells developers when they're doing a giant development what they have to do with their stormwater. In New Jersey, there's now new laws having to do with green stormwater infrastructure, which means that you're going to handle the stormwater in a more naturalistic way, as opposed to just sticking a giant retention basin in. So there's new laws in New Jersey about that, but it applies to most properties that are over or disturbances of soil and properties that is greater than 1 acre. And in towns like mine, which is already developed, we don't have anybody developing whole acres of property. And there's a lot of towns in New Jersey like this. That really adds up. I'm looking to see them do add a minor development clause, which means that if you disturb soil for more than, say, 250 square feet or 480 square feet, whatever your town thinks is right, that actually goes into your town's ordinances and it becomes a law. And when somebody wants to do something, they now are being faced with a law as opposed to a recommendation by a zoning board. And then, of course, finally, we should learn more about stormwater utilities, all of us. They're not right for every town, but they're a really cool idea, because the money, like I said, correlates impervious cover with funds to mitigate stormwater problems. So that's my story about being an activist with this one project that I have that was started by Fred. It's something I think people can do in their towns. If all you got to do is get a hold of the records and do a little bit of math and go and talk to your zoning board and watch their jaws fall. So that's it, Fred. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. So the last several slides are kind of a summation of some of the topics that that Lorraine and I have talked about, and actions that we can take, that you can take in your community. And there's not a one size fits all. It may be adjusted a little bit differently for your particular situation, but we've had success. One particular project is we had a photo documentation project where we went out and we looked at and we tried to find some teenagers with iPhones, and we could hardly find any. That's not true. We found a lot, but we trained them through a one-day session to do a photo documentation project. And many of these images are coming from them. But some actions that you can take, as Lorraine was referencing, is to go out and report your findings. You know, if I go out and take a look at the site that a particular developer is looking to develop, and make sure that it's being characterized accurately. There's a lot of regulations that are in development's favor, but it's up to the community, up to the grassroots community, to try and make sure that the information that applicant is submitting to their planning or zoning board is accurate. And being able to go in front of your municipality and report your findings is key. You have to be the voice. Look downstream. We're working on a project at upstream, downstream in many communities over in the Darby watershed, where developments up in the Villanova and Radnor and Swarthmore areas have a significant impact on the environmental justice communities down by the airport, down by the John Hines Wildlife Refuge. And by in this particular situation, where you see this image of this large sediment chain, this large sediment deposit in the stream. This is like a mile and a half downstream from where a lot of development is happening. And what our job is to make sure that, we're already having these significant impacts to the ecological health, and this is a park. So the community, the community's resources downstream. And so these are an image like this to your planning or zoning board or your mayor and council can be very valuable, to raise awareness and to make sure that the applicants coming in and doing a better job at design and stormwater design. Again, just more impacts downstream. These are actually from the Hamilton Township study we talked about. Is with increased development upstream, it leads to not only the sedimentation we saw earlier, but fish kills. And again, it's when these are the impacts that could happen on a regular basis, but if nobody's paying attention, if nobody's gathering that data and sharing that data, then it happens and it goes away. It happens and it goes away. The loss of recreational opportunities with irresponsible or poorly designed and poorly approved development upstream. Some of the negative impacts are, you can see algal blooms where a canoe trip on a Sunday afternoon is not possible, or a swimming hole, as you see in the picture on the right, has been contaminated. And in both Pennsylvania and New Jersey, the HABs, the harmful bacteria that is closing swimming holes all over the place is partly the result of development and stormwater runoff and non-point source pollution from upstream sources. So again, these are the stories that you want to tell and make sure the local decision makers in your community and downstream and upstream know as they are going through these. Every month the new projects are being presented and approved, and you want to make sure that they understand that these are the costs of that development. Reporting pollution. This is another important action for us all to take. The image on the left, where the DPW is draining is repairing a pipe, and they're allowing this muddy water discharge to go right into the stormwater inlet going out into the lake. And this is Lorraine Prince's feather in her cap. She just walked over to them and just asked, what did they, why were they letting that muddy sediment go right out into the lake? And they were saying that it was an emergency repair they had to fix. And it turns out, they could have put down hay bales just to filter some of that sediment out. There are best management practices, BMPs, that could be implemented. And with more people speaking out and raising these issues, I'm convinced, as somebody who does this full time, is that many of those DPW guys, the next time they do it, they'll grab those hay bales and put them up to filter it out, because they recognize now the importance of trying to control that dirt and sediment from going out into the lake versus being scooped up and disposed of properly. So reporting pollution is a very important action that we all need to take. This in Pennsylvania, each municipality in Pennsylvania has to do a pollution reduction plan, or a PRP. And it's right now, it's a relatively new process that every town has to do. You can have access to this. Many municipalities, this information is right on the websites, on the township's websites under stormwater. But this is in Pennsylvania, every town is required by law to show how are you going to reduce the amount of sediment by 10%, and how are you going to reduce the amount of nutrient pollution by 5%. And again, it's right now it's an academic exercise, but the DEP Pennsylvania is working municipalities towards creating stormwater infrastructure through green infrastructure and other types of best management practices to reduce the amount of sediment and nutrients going into their local streams. So their township engineers will do these maps and calculations. And this is an image along Sproul Road in Marple Township. And it just shows that, and the point of this is that this is another tool that as an activist, you can bring to the municipality's attention if a development is being proposed in a certain area to get the pollution reduction plan, take a look at it, find that development site on the maps, because every part of the town will be mapped with, and it'll show this is what we plan to do in this small area to reduce the pollutants by 10 and 5% respectively. And then you can go take this in and you can ask the questions. How is cutting down X number of acres of trees or putting 40 houses on that cornfield going to impact our pollution reduction plan? And what will we now need to do in order to comply with Pennsylvania's MS4 regulations, their stormwater regulations in this pollution reduction plan? And again, all of these techniques and skills and ideas, probably none of them are slam dunks that are going to stop a development, but it continues to give ammunition to the planning board to do the right thing, or the zoning board to do the right thing. Another thing that you can do is go out and do wet weather monitoring. This is key, because this is if many times a little trickle of water coming out of a pipe or going down a stream course where a 5-year-old could jump across, you're not thinking of what the impact might be during a storm event. This one, we went out, we were right above this outfall pipe is a large Catholic high school complex. But during a rain event, you could kayak out of that same stream because it's nothing but rooftop and parking lot. And so when, with images like this made available to the decision makers, planning or zoning boards, et cetera, I mean, this can help us if a project is being proposed, we can take that as an opportunity to reduce the amount of runoff that in this particular instance, a high school, but it could happen anywhere. So wet weather monitoring is key. So the next time there's a heavy storm, put on your boots and your rain jacket and take your camera and go out with a friend and take some pictures, because it can be eye-opening, just like the data that Lorraine found opened eyes in the planning board. This sort of impact from wet weather monitoring is largely, people largely aren't seeing. And fair weather, go out for a hike too, and when it's nice out too. This is in Philadelphia, where you can see, and this is a fair weather trip, but you can see on the picture on the lower left, I mean, there's toilet paper and trash up in the trees, and the same is true on the picture on the right. So that during a wet weather monitoring or wet weather rain event, there's all kinds of nasty stuff coming out of that pipe. So this, again, now of course this outfall pipe is the largest combined sewer overflow in the city of Philadelphia. So I know everyone knows that this is problematic. It's a funding issue sort of problem, but the same on a smaller scale can be in your small town. Over in the Newton Lake watershed near Lorraine's house, there was for years, every time it would rain, a manhole would just bubble over with nasty stuff, and pictures were taken, and it ended up where it moved that whole restoration of the piping in those neighborhoods. It improved the piping. So to be honest with you, I don't know whether there's still toilet paper coming over that, but I know that there was problems with the stormwater system and the sewer systems being too connected, and they went through this process of disconnecting the two. And so the idea is that now maybe the sewer lines will handle even during a storm event. So, but fair weather photos are a key way even during dry weather. There's other resources available to you. In New Jersey, every county has a hazardous mitigation plan. In Pennsylvania, it's a similar mitigation plan. But in these documents, these were online, there's a lot of great information, a lot of ammunition on why responsible development and not developing in the floodplains and not cutting down woodlands to put up solar panels, why it's important. So these are great resources. The same with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission too. They have, this is just a Hamilton Township study again, but they have other municipal studies and a lot of stormwater data, a lot of stormwater information that as a community activist, you can utilize this. Here's the Pennsylvania version. It's called the State Mitigation Plan Update. This is just the update, but there are plans that are available too, talking about the importance of protecting natural systems. And that wraps up our PowerPoint. I think we gave ourselves some time for some questions and answers.
Thanks, Fred and Lorraine, for your presentation there. We do have one question that came in through the Q&A, but feel free to post any other questions that you have there. So I'll pose the first question to you guys. As a layman, how do I begin to find out about impervious coverage limits and variances granted by my town? Where do you get this information?
I guess I'll answer that one because I actually did that. So basically, my town happened to post all the minutes and the resolutions. Every time they passed a variance, they wrote it up and they actually put it online, which was very easy for me. Not all the towns did that. So I was able to go onto my town and find that out. The other way you can do it is you can use the OPRA laws, which are the Freedom of Information Act laws. And you can just Google OPRA and there's a number of sites that let you write up your request and then which municipality and department or whatever, and that it automatically has that all in its database and you can actually send and ask for requests. So as far as impervious coverage limits, I don't know if you're into reading, if you're into reading ordinances, but zoning limits, pervious balancing with impervious, it should be written up in one of your ordinances. It might even be written up if you look on your own town's website under zoning, there might be a zoning map and it might tell you that information.
I think most towns have, they outsource this. So if you type in zoning ordinances on your website, it'll take you to I think it's called 360. It's a different site and it takes you right to your town. You type in a search for impervious coverage and it'll take you right to the specific ordinance that it talks about that. And it's not easy reading. I mean, it's not like bedtime reading, but it's not rocket science either. So it tells you exactly what information you need to go there, but that's all online. And in Lorraine mentioned OPRA, the Open Public Records Act. That's New Jersey. In Pennsylvania, it's the right to know. It's the same thing. You fill out a form, and they and the municipality has to provide you with that information.
I have another question. I really like all the actions you've listed for better land use decisions, but where can I get some free technical information to help in understanding some of the information?
Lorraine, let me, well, we can both answer this. I mean, we had, what we have found both in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and New York a little bit, what I had found is by calling the state DEP and going to their land use, talking to the staff members, they want to help the community members understand, like even complex permits for dredging or landfill capping or some things that are fairly technical. you can usually get somebody on the phone to answer some questions for you, and you build a relationship with them. We did the same thing in many of the states. The Soil Conservation District. These are men and women that they focus on just managing erosion at construction sites, but they know a lot of the ecological activities that are going on and things that impact local waterways. Another project that we worked on and thinking outside the box. We knew a family whose son just graduated as an engineer from got a 4-year degree. I mean, he didn't know a ton of stuff about this was a forest restoration project. He didn't know everything, but he knew a lot more than we did. And we walked the site with him, and we looked at a map and at all of these technical icons all over the paper map. And he was, oh, you know what that means? This is what this means. And he got a lot out of it, but we got a lot out of it also. Lorraine?
Oh, no, you said it all, Fred. That was good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. I'm afraid it's time to wrap up our session, but I want to thank Fred and Lorraine once again for taking the time to share their research and expertise with us during this week of Watershed Congress presentations.